Welcome to The Explainer. You know how we do it here. We take complex topics and break them down using the source material itself. And today, we've got a big one. We're diving into a text that flips the script on the traditional story of Jesus and Christianity, one that challenges centuries of mainstream doctrine.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll lay out the author's main idea, and it's a real doozy. Then we're going to look at how they kind of take apart traditional beliefs, which they actually call idols. After that, we'll get to their alternative story, focusing on the one single event they say is the real good news. And finally, we'll wrap up with the big, so what? Why does any of this even matter?
Okay, let's get right into it. What is this huge, challenging idea? Well, the author's entire argument, everything we're about to talk about, really hangs on one single powerful premise. And they don't beat around the bush. The author comes right out and says it. Jesus was a regular person, a human being, not God. From their point of view, all these complicated theologies, like, the Trinity, they call it complete gibberish. The argument is that God's actual message should be simple, right? Simple enough for a kid to get it, not something that requires a doctorate in theology.
So, how do you even begin to make an argument like that? Well, for this author, you first have to clear the ground. You have to tear down the existing structure. And they do that by pointing to what they call the two main idols of modern Christianity. Now, this is a really bold move. You got to see that. They don't just say, oh, I disagree with these beliefs. No, they completely reframe them. The idea that Jesus is God, or that the Bible is this perfect inerrant book, to this author, that's not just wrong. It's a form of idolatry.
So let's take that first idol. Jesus as God. The author's point is that worshiping a human being as the Most High God is a huge no-no in the Hebrew Bible. It's strictly forbidden. And they argue that the whole incarnation story, God becoming a man, that's not even a Jewish idea. They claim it's a pagan concept that got mixed into Christianity way back in the 2nd century.
And the critique doesn't stop with Jesus, it moves right on to the Bible itself. This is what the author calls book idolatry. They say, look, the biblical canon we have today, it wasn't put together based on some pure logic. It was based on the opinions of church leaders centuries ago. They argued that the original texts were edited, even corrupted over time, so you can't just worship the book blindly. It needs to be critically interpreted.
Okay, so if those are the big idols you're supposed to tear down, what do you replace them with? What's the alternative? Well, the author lays out a totally different story. And they argue it's not just different, it's older, it's simpler, and frankly, they think it makes a whole lot more sense. And you can really boil the difference down to this. It's not a story of incarnation, God coming down to become a man. Instead, it's a story of selection, God looking at humanity and choosing one righteous man from the crowd to be his servant, to be his special representative.
Now, the author isn't just pulling this out of thin air. They point to what they see as historical proof for this belief. And that proof is a group of very early Jewish Christians called the Ebionites.
So according to the source we're looking at, these Ebionites believed a lot of the same things. They saw Jesus as a chosen man, a prophet, but definitely not a God-man. And their own Gospels and Scriptures apparently reflected that belief. They were even supposedly aware that a lot of the biblical texts had been messed with over the years. So when you have this different story of a chosen man, it builds to a totally different climax. For this author, the most important part of the story isn't the crucifixion. It's not the cross. It's what happens after the cross, the resurrection. And this is a massive shift in focus. The author flat out says that what most Christians preach today is a false gospel because it's all about a crucified God, which they call, again, an illogical pagan idea. The true gospel, in their view, is the story of a resurrected man. That's where the real hope is. And they use scriptures to back this up, like this one from the book of Acts. The argument here is that Jesus was made Lord and Messiah. He was appointed to that role after his resurrection. See the difference? It wasn't his status from birth, but a title he earned through his life and death. Yeah, this idea of transformation is everything. In this telling of the story, Jesus wasn't born a glorious Son of God. He was a human, a man of sorrows, who suffered and died. And he only became that glorious, powerful figure because of what God did at the resurrection. Okay, but why split hairs? Why is this distinction so important to the author? Well, this last part really gets into the implications this has for all of us, for humanity. The argument goes something like this. How can you, as a regular person, truly identify with or imitate a perfect, sinless God-man? It's an impossible standard, right? But what you can do is identify with and try to follow the example of another human being who got it right, someone who is just completely devoted to God. And this completely reframes how you see human potential. Instead of a story where humans are so worthless and sinful that God himself has to come down and die, this is a story where humanity is capable of producing someone so righteous that God chooses to give them the highest honor.
The author even takes that biblical analogy of the two Adams and gives it a twist. It's not about an incarnation. It's about a metamorphosis, a complete transformation. You go from being a mortal, flawed human to a glorious, resurrected being. And, this is the key, it's a path they argue is open to everyone.
And really, that's the ultimate point from this author's perspective. The resurrection of Jesus isn't just some one-off historical event that happened to one guy. It's the blueprint. It's the promise for all of humanity. It's our shared destiny.
So, what we've looked at today is a radical rereading of a story that is absolutely central to billions of people. It forces us to ask, not just what is the story, but where did it come from? How did it get to be the way it is? And it leaves us with this final, really provocative question to think about.